Welcome to Nextcasts, where we take you on a thrilling journey into the heart of innovation, urban development, and the future of our bustling cities. I'm your host, Emilia, CEO of Swissnex in San Francisco, and this is the METROPOLIS season. Good morning and welcome to this new episode of Nextcast, the METROPOLIS edition, celebrating the 20th anniversary of Swissnex in San Francisco. In today's podcast, we are here with Carolina Marques Bernard, book designer and independent researcher. Good morning, Carolina.
Good morning, Emilia. How are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you? You're in San Francisco right now, right?
Yes, I landed yesterday. Very happy to be here.
Oh, that's nice. We're looking forward to working with you. And very much looking forward to hearing more about who you are and what you do. So let's start with a very broad question. Who are you and what do you do?
Well, it was a good introduction. I'm a graphic designer and independent researcher. I'm from Spain, I'm from Barcelona, but I'm based in Zurich, in Switzerland, and I mostly work with book design and with design research. And my projects are normally in the fields of culture and anthropology, but also in the arts and fashion. And right now I'm working as a research associate at the Institute for Design Research at the Zurich University of the Arts in the Department of Design and Visual Communication. In there, and for the past years, I have focused my research practice in new possibilities in the human-environmental relationship, mostly drawing lines in the making process. So I really focus on the making and the doing and the creating as a sort of let's say, translator between species to connect through the making process with other species. And yeah, I'm also right now currently preparing what it will be my first seminar to bachelor students in design. It will be called Critical and Speculative Design in the Zurich University of the Arts next semester.
Mm-hmm. And so book designers, when you started to talk, I had some thought about books. I'm a book person. I moved all my books to San Francisco from Switzerland. But we know that nowadays a lot of activities and knowledge are produced or transmitted digitally. So what is your perspective on this, on the digital versus book? Is it still a medium that has a future somehow?
I definitely think so. I mean, I'm an analog person, absolutely. I mean, you can see with Speaking Bread that I talk about artisanal bread making, and I love the medium of books. I think books are a great disseminator of culture and a great way of sharing knowledge, and definitely technology and the digital world has allowed us to be much more independent and be self-learning, and we have all the possibilities in the digital world. But I really believe books have a special way of sharing content, and for me it's a great medium to be able to focus on one thing and also create something that will stay, that you have a different relation with books than with things that are in the cloud. You can touch the book, you can really create a relation with that, and I think that's something very special.
And could you now maybe talk, because your project Making Bread, the project that you're presenting in Swissnex at San Francisco, it's also a book, right?
Exactly.
Could you present it a little bit?
Yes. Speaking Bread, so it's titled Speaking Bread, Relationships Beyond Materiality. It's a project that analyzes interspecies relations that create or that emerge from the process of making artisan and traditional bread. And it's gathered into a book that actually will be officially published in spring 2024 if everything goes well, with Spectre Books. It's a German art publisher. And in there are 45 types of bread that represent this more theoretical perspective of how species can relate through the making process. So for me, let's say it was important to, as a designer, to look for ways to understand design differently, like really understand this, like what design is and does, and how can we use design really practically. And kind of like use it as a medium to look for different ways of researching and communicating and thinking that can help us kind of like shape new ways of interacting and problematizing current social aspects that are happening right now, and bring them into discussion. So while doing my master at the Zurich University of the Arts, I had the chance to arrive to the more than human or anthropocentric, Anthropocene discussion on our on the understanding of the moment that we live in right now. In which, as we said before, like rapid technological and scientific advances are really somehow forcing us to reevaluate our relationship with matter, with our surroundings, with the environment. So
when you talk about interspecies, you talk about the relationship between human and the bread.
Exactly. So it's the relation that emerges between the human, the baker, and the non-human or the more than human, which is the dough. The interesting part of speaking bread or like our artisanal bread making is that it's not made just by a thought of a human. Like humans couldn't do a real piece of bread by themselves. You need that interaction. You need humans that act as a physicist, putting like ingredients together. But you need the dough that transforms and ferments these ingredients that on their own do not provide sustenance into a really life-giving piece of food. So when I talk about multi-species or interspecies relations, I talk about the relation between the baker and the dough, and this like very primitive and intimate way of relating through our hands and through our senses when we do like craft practices.
Do you also focus on the leaven, because the leaven is kind of a living ingredient as well somehow. I heard that some people who have started to cultivate it during the pandemic give name to them when they go on holiday. You can even bring them to someone with leaven sitting somehow. So I was wondering if this particular ingredient had a special role in your project.
Well, I mean, it definitely has, because one of like the main things is to recognize that actually matter is alive, that has agency on its own, that has their own capacity to like transform and create like vitality on its own development and production. So it was very interesting to see how all these bakers that have no relation to like more specific theories of new materialism or like critical theories are really embedded this understanding of dough as something that is alive, that it's living, and that has its own agency. So they really like consider, even there were some like funny moments with the bakers in where they were really talking about the dough as their child, as something that it's alive. So you have to get used to that kind of like language and vocabulary, but it was really beautiful to see how much they appreciate, how much they respect something that it's alive and that it's giving them, like that feeds them.
Do you have, so we're talking about bread maker here. Have you encountered other people in your journey that had a similar relationship to non-living species or to materials?
Meaning the bakers, or
no, I was wondering, maybe to give you. I was wondering if it was the same for a carpenter with wood, for example. That he was also. My question to you is: Have you met other type of artisans who had a similar relationship with their work? You know, with the material they're working with.
No, not yet. Maybe in the future. Maybe I apply this theory in other craft practices. That could be an interesting way of like continuing with this project. No, I'm a design researcher, and I'm interested in new materialities and ecologies, and a way of kind of like implementing this research, this very theoretical research, in a reality, in something that happens, in something that it's tangible and then everyone can understand what's through bread. But it's the only like project so far that I have kind of like ethnographically researched. So for the moment, I know about bread. I don't know about other crafts, but I guess it's similar. I guess like the idea of really this idea of the oficio. In Spanish, we have this really beautiful word for this like specialities, these practices that really connect with the material in a very like primitive way. I think it's kind of like similar in all the cases, or I would think so. I would say so.
I would like to zoom out a little bit on the question of the making process, the process of making something, creativity, and the future. And I was wondering, what were your thoughts about, I'm really making a big step now, but to generative AI, because if you study the process of creation and the process of, making bread through, something physical that you evolve with the material, with the tools that we have today, you just prompt a couple of things and then you have your dough somehow. And I would like to have a couple of your thoughts about this new process. What does it mean for creativity? How is it going to change us in a way? What are your hypotheses about the world regarding this new technology?
Well, I think it's difficult to say, because I really think that technology can help us like understand matter and its agency and vitality very well. And I think that nowadays we have projects and organizations and new ideas through AI and through the technological kind of like possibilities that are great and that can give us like many options. But I really think that we have many answers in things that already exist. I think we have it really, I think like in order to be able to gain a change, climate change, political, economical, social change, it has to come from an ethical and moral perspective in how we position really ourselves in the world. And I think this idea of always trying to find the solutions through new things, it's positive in some ways. I really have nothing to say through projects that maybe are positive, even like in food industry with like new types of vegan meats and so on. I think they are great and give a lot of possibilities, but it still comes from an idea of like needing to do more and new things. And maybe we can just like step one, do one step backwards and realize that we are somehow detached of like the ground of this planet, of like the soil, the animals, the mountains, the air, the clouds, like everything that's around us. We live in this like sterilized concrete boxes. I mean, it's a very like dystopic way of seeing it, but we have disregarded ancient knowledge of how to really relate to our surroundings. And through that knowledge, this very traditional knowledge, if we really like kind of like understand it as this like knowledge that has been like gathered through years and years of experience of like try and error of like understanding what surrounds us, and that we are not the only species here, that we share a common space with other species. That old knowledge can actually teach us a lot of things. So yeah, I'm more an analog than a digital person. I think there we have many answers that could be used for a change.
Building up on what you said, or not actually, could you tell us what is your radical vision for the future?
I mean, I think there's like one answer to that. I don't have like one specific like vision. I'm interested in what is happening. I'm interested in not even like finding solutions to. I also think it's kind of like a problematization to like see this like post-natural scenario as a problem solution based. I think I'm here interested in what is happening in trying to problematize the things and bring them into discussion. And I think like through very small steps, as for example supporting one practice or not the other, supporting for example artisanal bread making and not industrialized bread making, we can already make a big change. So I don't have like one big answer of like what would like the future be, but maybe for example just starting like eating artisanal bread and not industrialized, we could already like change like the path of our globalized world.
And if I make the hypothesis that, do you believe that people in the future will more and more come back to this type of ancient, traditional practices or knowledge, like you were describing a little bit more, how shall I say, maybe something that, probably closer to the earth and the ancestral tradition, rather than this more techno optimist world. Like, what is your guess on this?
I think it's very divided. I think there's many people that think that way, and I think that we have like a huge current of like people that I think that the origin of a number of questions that have originated from this historical time that we are living, like COVID, war, really huge social and economical crises, like the climate crisis, or like the urgency of needing to do something in order to stop climate change has pushed many people, like contemporary artists, like researchers, architects, physicists, really a lot of people, to imagine this post-human scenario, challenging this, let's say, this like this Western universal idea of the white male men to measure everything. So there's a huge part of the society that it's moving towards the past, kind of like practices that are much more present, much more local, in order to understand time differently. But there's also a huge part of the society that it's not really, I think we are all aware of climate change, but that are not really ready to make a step towards a change. Like people are afraid of the otherness, of like changing their habits. And that's why I meant that, I mean, we can bring many solutions, new things into the world. But if it's not a change that comes really from an ethical and moral point of view, in where we really understand our position in the planet differently, that we are not the only ones, and that we cannot kind of like use the nature as a background for human activity, it will be difficult. Actually, I have a bit of a dystopic way of seeing the future. I see it very difficult, actually, to change people's lives. But we are in a good way, I think.
If we, we started. You mentioned a little bit, like the social and economical setting of our society, and as you know, the 20th anniversary of Swissnex in San Francisco is about cities. That's the name of the project METROPOLIS. And the future of food was actually one of the main topics we decided to focus on. So I was wondering if you could share with us some of your thought about the role of food in the city. What is its role? What are the role of the artisan?
Well, I think like urban habitats are critical to survival, not only for humans. I mean, they're like located and critical, like migration of paths as well as for many species. So I think like even more considering all the like agricultural land that becomes like toxic by pesticides and herbicides, I think really like the role of cities are incredibly important, not only for us, but really for a multi-species justice. So I really think that kind of like the importance of coexisting with other than human species in it's kind of becoming the center of the ecological debate, and the idea of creating green scenarios. Not only like for our own needs, but in general, like to create like environments in the city that allow liveliness way easier. It's a huge. It's very important. So this can be related also with the idea of artisans. Like I think like it's easy to introduce these artisanal practices back to society. It is a change of as I said, to treat time differently. Like living in a rushed world, it's not taking us anywhere. So if we start thinking of time differently, we might have the possibility to introduce these practices that are healthier for us, healthier for the environment in general, in a much easier way.
Could you elaborate maybe a little bit on the last sentences that you were saying regarding the future of cities?
What I meant a little bit is that I think we have to consider time differently. We have to like treat time differently, like learn to be more present and local. It's not about the past or the future. Like the change really comes from the present, and living in a rushed, industrialized, globalized world where everything has to be like quick. It's not taking us anywhere. So it's not really working anymore. It's not relevant. So the idea of introducing practices that need more patience, more time, that are much more like fair to not only us humans, but more than human species, in where we can really like coexist in a healthier way. It's I think it's a future for really like making a change in our behavior in this planet, and I think it's possible. It's happening. I think like people is interested in it, and they're really kind of like engaged in this new mentality of how to approach everyday practices in an everyday basis.
I would like to come back to the cities, because you said something interesting. So, we need to consider the time and local, and, to also promote some practices, that requires more patience. And in my understanding, cities are the epicenter of things happening faster than on the countryside. So I was wondering, how can you solve this tension?
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, when I started with this project, I like a lot of questions started popping up in my mind, where are all these artisanal bakeries in the cities or in towns? Who are the clients? Old or young people? How much do they produce? 20 or 200 pieces of bread? And I realized that all these people I mean, fortunately and unfortunately, I mean, they are really in remote places. Cities are kind of they have developed through another path, and they are not kind of like welcoming these practices. You know, they are like keeping them aside. And I mean, it was interesting to see their social and economical situation, like their like how this like profession being like so fair to their local surroundings. I mean, they are really creating like micro economies and micro ecologies in their own towns, but it's kind of like difficult to extract this and make it like in bigger cities, and where everything kind of like goes in a different time frame. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's difficult to predict.
Mm-hmm. How do you have I'm thinking about one example that I have in San Francisco. There are 2 or 3 bakeries that are, I think, making bread in a very traditional way, also with some political mission, you know. But I was at the grocery store the other day, and one loaf was $17. And I was a bit caught between, you know, supporting this type of work, and on the other hand, there is an obvious economical question here of like, who can afford this type of bread? Is it also an aspect that you address in your work?
Yes. So I think I mean, there are kind of like two things here. One is like the traditional old way of baking bread. And then there's this other like modern sourdough kind of like current that we are living right now in cities normally, which now makes something with, you know, like artisanal bread is very simple. And in its base has only 3 ingredients: flour, water, and salt. So it's very cheap. It's like a very cheap like ingredient. That's why it has become kind of like the bedrock food of most of the societies. Because in a beautiful way, it does not understand of social status. You can, if you cannot afford meat or vegetables, you usually still can afford bread. I remember actually, now it came to my mind, a baker in Galicia, what was his name? Guillermo Moscoso from Pandemoa. He's the 3rd generation. He's in the 30s or 40s, and he took over the bakery like 5-10 years ago from his parents. He mentioned to me while I was there documenting his practice, he said, you know, the most beautiful thing of baking bread is that everyone finds themselves in the same bakery. You serve to the richest people the same way you serve to the poorest. And I found that really beautiful, because actually we tend to commercialize everything. But actually bread is it's a very simple and ordinary everyday product. And that can be, and for example, in Spain, this like artisanal bread, that it's still made in this old form and traditional way, it's very cheap. Actually, they struggle because industrialized bread in the supermarkets, which actually shouldn't be called bread. They should find another word, because it's not bread. It's really like, it has nothing to do to what bread has been for most of the history of humankind. It's completely something else. It doesn't have 3 ingredients, it has like between 31 and 37. So in there you can already like see how it's not the same. It's even cheaper. So they were telling me like their economical situation is really difficult, because it's something that takes time to produce. They need like 15, 16, 20 hours to produce these types of bread, and they have to sell like 1 kilo for €2, because in the supermarket it costs 2.20, or in the gas station. So it's true that like the kind of like this kind of like modern current that we are living right now in the cities of like sourdough bread and like super artisanal is becoming like very expensive. And I can't understand how this is, how can we like reshape this? Because of course, on one side, we have to appreciate and acknowledge the time that things take, and there is a price for that. And of course, then not accepting the lower price that we are used to from like supermarket, like bread from the supermarket, but we need to find like an in between, because I mean it's an essential piece of food, and you cannot like buy, in Switzerland it's like 10 francs, $10 for a piece of bread, half kilo, and that's unbelievable.
I like this idea of bringing some more like slowness or patience mainly into the cities. Probably something that would also do good to, I guess, to humans in general, probably mental health and less stress. So it seems like a promising future to me. I like to end up this series asking people, we talk a lot about sustainable futures as well. And I was wondering if you could give us, or if you had some tips maybe for our listeners, on how they can contribute to more sustainable urban futures.
Eat artisanal bread, I would say. I mean, I don't know. I think being very conscious in what type of practices you support. I think like people don't have enough patience or time to think about what type of practices do you want to support. How is this that you are eating made? Which ingredients are being used? From where does it come from? Maybe starting from there, which is very simple, just like thinking of what type of food you want to eat and from where does it come from, and what type of practices are related to that, can be a big step. I think like from small things like that make a huge difference. So let's eat artisanal bread.
What is particularly interesting in the way you frame it is, I was expecting what type of product do you support, but I like the way of framing it, what type of practices do you support over the product. Actually, it's much more about the craftsmanship than about the end product.
Absolutely. I think at least picking bread, it was really focused. I mean, the book, the outcome, records and documents these 45 breads, and you have the history and kind of the anecdotes of the bakers, and you have some images of the outcome, but it's mostly about the process. And this is a funny thing, but I'm gluten allergic, so I did a project about bread and I couldn't even try any of the types of bread, which is kind of like a torture, and many people can not really understand that, but it made me kind of analyze these types of bread differently, on really how they were made. And actually it seems that the process is very similar, because you mix flour, water, and salt, you let it ferment, you do a shape, you bake it. But actually you realize that by very small changes in the process, like leaving it 10 minutes more ferment, or inside wooden kind of wardrobes, or outside in the air, or if it's colder or warmer, or if you shape it more or less, it changes completely the process. So indeed, I think it's really about the relations, the making with, this, as for example, Donna Haraway introduces with the simple yes, is this idea of the kind of combination of making with things, placing the attention in the process and not so much in the outcome.
Well, great. I was about to ask you any final tip on baking bread at home, but if you're gluten allergic, I don't know if you do that yourself with the gluten-free wheat, or.
Yes, actually, I do it. I actually, all this project also started with realizing that I have this allergy, I cannot eat bread, but I want to have good bread. The gluten-free options that you have in the supermarket are pretty bad, mostly with a lot of extra ingredients that you don't need, a lot of sugars. So I started I did kind of like a couple of weeks of, I worked in a bakery in Spain with Takala. She knows a lot about bread making. She has a lot of experience, and she teach me she showed me how to do normal bread, because I think like in order to know how to do gluten-free bread, you need to understand how like dough works and how fermentation works and how you transform
Carolina,
air into gases.
could you start again? Could you just start again explaining this experience? Because we just had a cut with the Wi-Fi.
Oh, it's my Wi-Fi not working well?
Most of the time it is, but I mean, 99% it's fine. And
Okay.
it's just I really wanna hear this story. So if you
Sorry.
don't mind, just telling us again that you started working at this place in Spain.
Yeah. So I had my first experience in bread making with in a bakery in Spain with Takala. She's a baker for over like 30 years. She has a lot of experience, and she has a lot of experience in baking gluten-free bread, but not from now that it's kind of like a hip thing, but from like years ago. She was always interested in finding different ways of keeping with this process of baking with other grains. And this led her to do breads with like rice or corn or other ingredients that don't have gluten. So I had to learn to do bread with gluten in order to understand how it works, how the ingredients ferment together, and like kind of like the outcome with gluten in order to understand what you need as a lac for the gluten-free bread. So to answer to your question, yes, I bake bread at home. I would love to have more time to do it more often. I think it's also like a romanticized thing of like, oh yes, I will do it. But then you want it right now, but no, you need to let the dough rest. You need to, like that ferment. So things kind of like expand a lot in time. So I don't do it so often, but it's possible. It's possible to do it, and it's a great kind of achievement. You really feel like so independent when you're able to do such things by yourself. So I really encourage people to do it. And of course, I mean, I don't have like recipes in the book. It's not like a recipe book based project, but you have kind of like stories that relate to this process. So there it might have some like, I don't know, like interesting things for the people to see in order to bake bread at home.
That's great. We'll try to get a good recipe from you, and we'll add it in the show note, right?
Great. Good idea.
Well,
yes.
Thank you very much, Carolina. And again, I think it's also, as you were saying, making bread for oneself is also about being patient with oneself, I guess. And question of time is very relevant here. And talking of time, we are about to end this podcast with you. So thank you very much for participating, for sharing your insights.
Thank you, Emilia. It was great.
Yeah, thank you very much for participating to this Nextcasts podcast, the METROPOLIS edition, which is the edition for the 20th anniversary of Swissnex in San Francisco. We're very much looking forward to continuing working with you, welcoming you here in San Francisco in our space for the project, and we wish you a great day.
Thank you. You too. See
Bye.
you soon.
This episode was part of the METROPOLIS season, where we celebrate Swissnex in San Francisco's 20th anniversary. Find out more about the anniversary and upcoming events by Swissnex in San Francisco in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode and see you at one of our upcoming events.